Okay, my name is Lawrence McGlynn, and you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia on Comcast Channel 66 and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHMWPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by Councilmember Jamie Gaudier. Lance Haver will discuss the United States Department of Health and Human Services agenda, and Vanessa Maria Graber will report on the city's use of artificial intelligence and technology. And we are live from City Council chambers here. Apparently, I'm the only one. I don't know where everybody else is tonight. Denise is here in chambers with me on the other end of the room, so we don't echo and cancel each other out. But apparently, she is not in the chat here. On the screen, so that's okay. So it's just me. So what we've been doing here today is keeping an eye on the budget bills and all the other bills that come with it. And nothing has been passed yet, is the short answer. And what we're waiting on is council to come back into session at 6:30. So we will be here live when that happens, albeit in a different room. We're just starting here in chambers. And we're waiting on the budget. We're also waiting on the $800 million home plan, which is on its way, we've been told. And, there have been some serious questions about that from council members today. We saw a rather heated exchange between Councilmember Isaiah Thomas and City Budget Director Rob Dubow, which was interesting because a lot of the questions that we've been asking were the questions that were that Isaiah Thomas and Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson were asking, namely, can the city spend $400 million in 2 years? And recent history suggests no. When you had programs like MPI and other things like that, we didn't see that money get spent that quickly. And the issue with that is you might think, well, okay, you keep $400 million in the bank, you spend it as you need it. Well, the problem with that is $400 million sitting in a bank account that's been borrowed is accumulating interest. You have to pay the interest. And the interest that you're paying off is more than you would get in a bank account. So the city would be losing money on a deal like that. So that's one of the things we're keeping an eye on. We're also keeping an eye on the budget. We don't exactly know 100% what's happening there, but it is... they had the committee of the whole hearing this morning, which is where the budget comes from. And when that happens, every council member gets a say, gets voted on. But we got here at 9 a.m. and committee of the whole was opened and recessed right away. So recessed until 4. We got here at 4 and it was recessed until 7. So we're still waiting on that. We will not have budget information before we go off the air tonight, but it'll be in our newsletter this week. We'll know more, as today and tomorrow. Budget will be passed today, or probably today or tomorrow. It'll come out of committee next week. And then we'll have a budget by the end. And there's Denise Clay-Murray. Denise, how are you?
Well, now that we've gotten some of the technical difficulties out of the way, I'm much better. Thanks.
Good.
And we're also joined by Vanessa Maria Graber and Lance Haver in the studio. So you have tonight the whole Hall Monitor gang all in one group.
It sounds like you two had a very exciting council session. Some bad emails, some raised voices, some difference of opinions. Something that doesn't happen very often, or at least didn't happen very often when there was a council president Clark.
Right. You didn't see that too often. But so how's everybody doing? Vanessa, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well. We're in the middle of our WPPM Spring Fund Drive. So I just want to remind everybody that we have a goal of raising $12,500. We've already surpassed our $10,000 goal. So if people would like to donate, they can go to wppm.phillycam.org/donate, and they can make a donation and pledge for the Hall Monitor Show, your weekly source for news and information about all things happening in the city.
And we really appreciate it if you do make the pledge. The truth is, the level of coverage that we're able to provide because of the radio station, because of Philly Cam, wouldn't exist otherwise. It's great to pick up the Philadelphia Inquirer. It's wonderful to get news sources from other places. But the level of information that you're getting from us doesn't exist anyplace else. And if we don't fund public radio, if we don't fund public television, if we don't fund our own news sources, there will be nothing other than corporate news sources to provide all the news that corporations want us to read. So if you want to hear about the tax bills, if you want to understand the real issue with the housing bill, that putting $400 in the bank means that you're going to have to pay debt service, some banker, some bondholder is going to make out like a bandit while the money sits in the bank and people don't get homes. If you want to read about the travesty of SEPTA or what's going on with utilities, or you want to hear the real truth about what's happening in Kensington, we need public radio, and we can only get it if you support us. So please, we're not asking for much, not your firstborn. We're not asking you to tithe, but you can send $5, a cup of coffee, and that's all we're really asking for.
That's right. You heard it from Lance. We're actually community radio, not public radio, because this station is run by community volunteers, just like us. And we have a ton of interns and youth media. And this is one of the only programs on the station that does in-depth reporting on all happenings at City Hall.
Although we wouldn't not accept a tithe.
Whatever you're comfortable with. So
if you want to give 10% of your paycheck every month to WPPM and what we do here at Hall Monitor, we would not accept it. But we'll take, we recognize that you are that this is a community radio station in the poorest big city in America. So if you only want to give us $1 for all of the information we try to give you to make sure that you're doing what's best for you and your family, we accept $1 graciously, and thank you very much for it, because that tells us that we're important enough to you to get that $1. And that inspires us to continue to do the work we do so that we can give you what you need, give you give you the tea, as the kids say.
Yeah, and keeping it commercial free from corporate influence. We don't have corporate sponsors, and I think that that's a really big deal when we look at other commercial media and the way that they report on these things. They're definitely influenced by their sponsors and by other, big name donors. So to be funded by the community is something we're very proud of. So again, it's wppm.phillycam.org/donate. Or if you just go to phillycam.org, you should be able to find the button there.
All right. And getting into that news that we cover, we're going to start today with an interview with Councilmember Jamie Gaudier. We touch on a lot of things because Councilmember Gaudier has been very busy lately, not least of which is housing, which is our number one issue. But we talk about some other things, and we're going to have Councilmember Gaudier on again in the summer, because there's actually a lot of stuff we didn't get to that we really wanted to ask her about. So here is our interview with Councilmember Jamie Gaudier.
Oh. The hell?
Are we recording?
Well, it said recording in progress when I logged on.
Okay. Looks like we are. Yes, we are. Okay. All right, Councilmember, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So the first thing I'd like to talk about, what are some of the new developments with your Defying Displacement legislative program?
So we're in the second phase of Defying Displacement. I just want to remind everyone that this is a multi-phase campaign, and we had a number of measures passed last year and even this last election. So the first phase of Defying Displacement was all about protecting the most vulnerable renters and homeowners. The city's new low-income property tax freeze, which is up and running and enrolling folks. We strengthened enforcement around Section 8 voucher discrimination, and we closed the loophole with the city's density bonus program that ensures that any money coming to the city of Philadelphia from developer density bonuses will not just be in the general fund. It will be deposited into the housing trust fund as intended and used for affordable housing measures in the communities where that money is generated. That was a ballot measure actually on the May 20th election slate, and 75% of voters approved it. This second phase of defying displacement is all about production. It's been estimated that if nothing changes, around how affordable housing is produced, it will take 2 centuries for us to create the amount of affordable housing needed in the city of Philadelphia. And we cannot wait 2 centuries, obviously. We need affordable housing right now. So Defying Displacement 2 is about cutting red tape and making it faster, easier, and cheaper to build affordable housing in the city. So there are a number of bills associated with the campaign that get towards that goal. 2 of them have passed out of committee and will be headed to the council floor for a final vote. One of the bills cuts down permitting time, so it cuts down the amount of time that it takes to get a zoning permit and a building permit for affordable housing projects specifically. So the bill proposes that if you want to build an affordable housing project, you should be able to get your building permit within 5 days. If we are serious about building affordable housing, we have to cut down the time and the cost. It also proposes that affordable housing projects to get expedited here. That allows for the affordable housing commitments made by developers to be codified. So many times, I'm sure you've participated in RCO levels. And certainly that was happening across the city, but it was really happening in West and Southwest Philadelphia. And I worked really hard with my colleagues to push, the Kennedy administration to do more. That was when I passed the resolution that Mayor Kenney should declare a gun violence emergency. It was also where I stood up with several council members to demand at least $100 million investment in violence prevention programs at the community level.
Hello, Denise.
Hi.
We're not seeing the video
happened
on the
to
screen. If
the
you guys bring it
Jamie
back up, let
Gaudier
us
interview?
know. But
Oh, okay. I think I found it.
yeah, sometimes it happens when you're at City Hall,
Yeah.
and that's where Denise and Larry are tonight. They're reporting
Yes.
live from City Hall.
Live radio.
Yes, I always wanted to write a show about community media called Technical Difficulties.
Mhm.
And here in the studio, we've certainly experienced a fair amount of that. But that just goes to show, this station is run by volunteers, and we're live on the radio, and that happens sometimes.
Mhm.
It looks like you might have found the video again. Do you want to try bringing it up one more time for our listeners and viewers?
Here we go.
All right. Once again, this is Jamie Gauthier.
Okay, give me a second.
Yeah, we're gonna fast forward it to around where we left off. Again, you're listening to the Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Currently, there are 4 districts where bonus units could be built. That's the first, the third, the second, and the 7th. However, they can only be built by variance. And the process is so lengthy, complicated, and costly that we've only had 10 bonus units built in the last decade, though we filled a lot of requests from homeowners who want to participate in bringing more affordable housing to the community. But right now, the process is just too complicated. So we want to remove that barrier. And in the districts where bonus units are already allowed, we want them to be allowed by right, as long as they're not changing the outside appearance of the structure or the outside appearance of the block. So that's what Defined Displacement 2 is all about: cutting red tape, bringing affordable housing online in a way that's easier, faster, and cheaper.
And that's a lot.
No, that was a lot. Thank you for letting me explain all that.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's excellent to see some of this happening. And the reason I say this is because it's not the only thing you've been up to. You've been up to a lot of stuff. One of the things that I wanted to touch on a little bit, you recently went to Harrisburg to advocate for an expansion of post-arrest diversion programs for young people. Why are we having this problem, and where do we stand now with this?
Sure. Yes, we recently went to Harrisburg, and we brought council members, and we also worked with our state colleagues to lobby and to advocate for $50 million across the state to support post-arrest diversion programs. And the reason why this is important is because diversion programs work, and that's been shown again and again and again. First of all, youth that go through diversion have a much lower chance of recidivism. So it helps to get young people on the right path better than detention. Diversion is a lot cheaper. So whereas it could cost almost $300,000 to detain a young person, the most extensive diversion program is about $10,000 per young person. And, when we invest in diversion programs that work, it helps to bring down crime overall, and it helps young people to get on the path they need to be on. And I think this started really to come together for me through my work on gun violence over the years, and because the Philadelphia Juvenile Justice Services Center is in my district. And so, when I started council in 2020, it was during COVID, and not only were we dealing with COVID, but gun violence was just hitting shocking levels, historic levels. And certainly that was happening across the city, but it was really happening in West and Southwest Philadelphia. And I worked really hard with my colleagues to push, the Kennedy administration to do more. That was when I passed the resolution that Mayor Kenney should declare a gun violence emergency. It was also where I stood up with several council members to demand at least $100 million investment in violence prevention programs at the community level in 2021. And, I truly believe that through those efforts of council and the administration and the district attorney's office, and most importantly, our community partners that are working on the ground, we've been able to bring gun violence down to historic levels, and we're on a really good path. At this year, I believe we've seen a 17% reduction, and that follows a 40% reduction last year. But the area where we have not done well, the area where we are going in exactly the wrong way, is with youth gun violence. That's been climbing and climbing and climbing for the past several years. And so for me, I started to think about, what can we do to pull youth out of a cycle of violence? And I also, at the same time, was getting quite a lot of outreach from family members that had youth in the Juvenile Justice Services Center and from staff about how unsafe of a place it was and how the conditions inside the center were not good. The center was overcrowded, and we were not helping to put young people on a good path. The young people had been cycling in and out of that detention center, and really, it's not helping young people to stay out of a path of violence. But diversion can be an answer to that. Number one, it allows us to have the young people served in our communities and relieve some of the overcrowding that we've seen. And it's more likely to stop young people from recidivism, and to get them on the path where they need to be. And so I'm a big believer in diversion programs for our young people. A young person's future should not be defined by their worst day or by the worst thing that they ever did. These are the leaders, the future leaders of our city, and we have to invest in their future.
All right, I'd like to bring Denise Clay-Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Hi, Denise.
Hi, how are you? And thank you for joining us. Now that the resolution to put the money in the Housing Trust Fund has been passed, is there a plan to get the money from the general fund into the Housing Trust Fund? And is there something that has been put together that says, okay, you get this money, it goes over here? Because as you mentioned when we talked on election night, it had gone into the general fund previously. Is there a connection now to deconnect it from the general fund?
Absolutely. And it's really simple. My legislation says that, if in a given year, a certain amount, however many million, comes into the city from this density bonus program, the next year, there has to be a corresponding investment in the Housing Trust Fund. And that money has to be spent in the council district where it is generated. So it's fairly simple, but it had to be really clarified in the city code. And that's why we had to have it as a ballot question during the election. And Philadelphia has wonderful housing programs that we're known for all across the country. They're just underfunded. And so this is a measure to get more money to the housing programs that people rely on. And just to give you a sense of scale, in the past 4 years, this density bonus money amounts to around $36 million. So that's the amount of money that we were losing out on because of this loophole. But it's fairly easy of a law to interpret. And there's a wealth of housing programs that we can invest in. Everything from the basic systems repair program that provides homeowners with up to $25,000 in grant money to help them do critical repairs that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise, to adaptive modification that helps seniors and people with disabilities to outfit their homes, to shallow rent, which provides a subsidy to already subsidized housing projects, but it brings the rent down so that low-income people can afford it. So we have a number of housing programs. I put them up against, any other city in the country. They're just underfunded. I also think that this measure to make sure that we have more money in the Housing Trust Fund and the second phase of defying displacement, which is about making it easier to create affordable housing, pair very nicely with the mayor's home plan. The mayor's goal is to create and preserve 30,000 units of housing. We're never going to do that over, the next several years if we don't change something, if we don't generate more resources for that, and if we don't cut some of the bureaucracy that's in the system now.
Okay, now you mentioned the home program. From what I understand, council is taking a look at what it likes and what it doesn't like about it, and you all are making decisions to, go to the mayor and say, hey, how about adding this or how about taking away that? Where does that effort stand right now? Will we have a home program? But will we have a home program thing set up before the end of the budget cycle, or is that something we'll look forward to in the fall?
That's the goal. I mean, we're kind of in the middle of everything right now. We're in the middle of negotiating on the budget with the administration. We're in the middle of deliberating on the home plan. So in one sense, it seems a little daunting to figure out how we get this all done by June 12th. But on the other hand, council always gets it done every year, and it always feels like it's a lot of work. But I feel confident that we'll get there.
Now, in terms of the programs that you mentioned, with that Philadelphia has for homeowners, you don't really hear enough about them. When you talk to people and you tell them that something like this is available, the look on their face is like, oh my God, I didn't notice. How do we get the word out better about that? How do we, and particularly you have stuff like that, and you also have the fact that homeowners can use the 10-year tax abatement, and people don't know that. How do we do a better job with that?
I think we have to do a much better job. We have to do a better job with our online presence and having that be clear and having people know how to navigate the city's websites and find the information that they need. I think we have to do a better job of meeting people where they are, having information go out into the community, or having information at places and organizations that people trust, like their churches or their various community organizations. Social media, radio. I think we have to broadcast all of the things that we have as a city. And I think we have to do a better job of automatic enrollment where that's applicable. So just to give you an example, I talked a little bit earlier about the low-income property tax freeze program that I created with the support of my colleagues and the administration during the first phase of Defying Displacement. This program allows for our most low-income homeowners, and Philadelphia does have the distinction of having homeowners that are across the socioeconomic spectrum. So this program allows our most vulnerable homeowners to freeze their property taxes at prior year levels. And so because it was created last year, it will allow income eligible people to avoid the last round of assessments that push people's property taxes up pretty high. And so this is a program that can keep people in their homes and stop them from getting displaced because they can't afford their property taxes. But even though we opened the program in the fall and we've done, a robust amount of promoting, there are only 2,500 people enrolled in this program, but we estimate that 62,000 households are eligible. And so because we think the enrollment numbers currently are a good start, but Councilmember Rue Landau and I know that that's not good enough. So we introduced a bill to extend the application deadline to September, and we're trying as much as we can to get the word out and to get many more people enrolled in this critical program. But the gold standard would be automatic enrollment. We have to figure out how to do that as a city.
Okay, well, thank you so much for giving us some of your time. And speaking of broadcast, you were listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5, and I'm going to go back to Larry McGlynn, our co-host.
All right, thank you, Denise. And Councilmember, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me and for allowing me to speak about this work. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
And we're back. That was our interview with Councilmember Jamie Gaudier, and now here in City Hall with Larry McGlynn, because this is where we're going to be until we have a city budget, or until they kick us out.
Yeah, one or the other.
One or the other, but it's going to be one of those things.
So now what we'd like to
Happens in-
do is bring on Lance Haver to tell us a little bit about his column from yesterday's Hall Monitor newsletter and where we are in the Health and Human Services Department.
Right, but before I talk about Make America Healthy Again and how it's really just saying what Mrs. Obama said, what President Biden said, what President Obama said, what Senator McGovern said, same words. I want to ask you, what happens if they don't reach an agreement tonight?
Oh, all right. So what happens here is the reason today is so important, or tomorrow morning, the budget has to be in bill form, introduced in City Council tomorrow, so it can have first reading and then final reading the following week on the 12th. The reason this is important is because the 12th is the last session of City Council for the year. If the budget is not ready by tomorrow, they would have to have a special session at some point in order to advance it out of committee and have the first reading and then have the second reading so it can be passed before the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. If it's not passed by June 30th, nobody gets paid come July 1st.
Well, that must hurt.
Yeah.
Now, we did a fair amount of coverage of the small business $100,000 exemption. Small businesses didn't have to pay any business taxes on the first $100,000 in revenues. The mayor's proposal is to eliminate that.
Yeah.
Is that proposal going to pass, or is the small businesses going to see very large tax increases this year?
Yes. As of today, when we were in the budget hearing, Councilmember Isaiah Thomas asked City Finance Director Rob Dubois about that. Dubois' answer was no, the city's not going to appeal the decision or fight the decision to eliminate the bird tax because they're afraid they would lose. And then it would create other problems for them down the road. So that will not be coming back.
I can just see John Lewis now saying, I'm not going to go across that bridge because someone might sue me.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. It's very upsetting to know that the mayor and city council are going to throw all the small businesses under the bus, raise their taxes for the next 5 years, and claim that they're lowering business taxes. But if that's where it is, that's where it is. I know that Councilmember O'Rourke had said that he was going to fight to double that exemption, but I'm assuming from your report that he's not been successful.
No, the city solicitor would have to fight that in court, and they're not willing to do so. And there are many members of City Council who are very unhappy about this.
And no member of City Council has thought about hiring their own lawyer to defend this?
That has come up, actually. And there are questions as to how that would work and what that would look like. Some of the concerns about that is, should City Council have its own solicitor? That's one of the things that came up. Just like the mayor's office and the city has a solicitor, should City Council have their own? The argument against it is, well, first of all, the city solicitor is the lawyer for everybody in city government, city council and mayor alike. But what happens when there's a conflict? And but then what happens is, if the city council has their own solicitor and there's a difference of an opinion between the two solicitors, does city council take the mayor to court? So there's a lot of questions about how that could work. And we didn't really get any of that resolved, but it has come up in conversation.
It perhaps would be a good idea for someone to pass out John F. Kennedy's book, Profiles in Courage, before they actually close out on the budget. It's inconceivable to me that someone's afraid they may lose in court, as if that's a major problem.
Yeah.
Losing in court is not the same as being put in jail for 20 years. It's not the same as having your head beaten. It's not the same as being assassinated. If you lose in court, you say, oh, well, and go on. I can't believe that that's some big threat to these elected officials unless they really are struggling with the concept of having a backbone. And speaking of not having backbones, I'd like to make a report on one of the things that came up in the last week, and that's the Make America Healthy Again, the MAGA report. And it's really a curiosity to me that what appears to be happening is what's being said is not nearly as important as who's saying it. So in the Make America Healthy Again report, they're not saying anything new. They're not saying anything that Mrs. Obama didn't say, that Senator McGovern didn't say, that the government has been doing for years. You know, the federal government is the reason why milk is fortified with vitamin D, which is, by the way, one of the big things that a lot of the Make America Healthy people say can cure measles. So the federal government has been trying to and actually succeeding in improving people's health through diet for over 100 years. So the first part of the Make America Healthy Again report says diet is important and we really ought to do something about it. The second part of the report is going ahead and saying, look, there are all these environmental poisons that are happening that we have to do away with, because especially for children, the environmental poisons create chronic illnesses. The third thing the report says is chronic illnesses are a problem. It's an ever-growing problem, and what we've been doing hasn't been working. And here's again where it gets interesting, because the Make America Healthy Again report says the federal government has the right guidelines. The dietary guidelines have been changed since Senator McGovern developed them in 1968. There were some mistakes, and that is part of science. Whatever we say now, some part of what we believe now is going to prove in 20 years to be incorrect. The sad part is we don't know what's incorrect. For people my age and in my socioeconomic bracket, there was a huge push to get us to stop eating butter. Don't eat butter. It's saturated fat. Eat margarine. Huge push to get us to eat lean meat. Don't eat any fat at all. Do away with it. To switch to what are commonly referred to as seed oils or processed oils. We now know, some 30, 40 years later, without revealing my age, 40 years later, that one of the worst foods that you can eat is margarine. And there's general agreement about that we should be eating butter. Thank you. And so we know some of the things that we're talking about are going to turn out to be wrong. And science is going to go ahead and improve. So the environmental poisons, though, we know are a problem. And this is something that's been addressed for quite a while. We've been talking about some level of environmental racism, where we look at where these processing plants are, almost always in poor neighborhoods, almost always in neighborhoods of color. And we know that those poisons being released by recycling, by burning trash, damage our kids' health. So that's the second part. Again, nothing new here. This is what we have thought for the last 20 years. The other thing that we think is that our kids are being overly medicated. Well, again, this is really not news. The Center for Disease Control under President Obama said we have to be careful. We're overprescribing medicine. And most of us now know that antibiotics have been so overprescribed that many of the bugs now can defeat the antibiotics. And we're running into a health crisis because we don't have a new generation of antibiotics that can defeat the bugs that have adapted to the old antibiotics. And so none of this is new. In fact, if you go back and you read Mrs. Obama's words and you look at what she actually said, what Mrs. Obama said is, we've got to eat healthier, we've got to do better, and we have to move, which is exactly what Bobby Kennedy Jr. has written in this report. It's almost word for word, but when Mrs. Obama said it, when Mrs. Obama said, look, let's eat better, let's do away with the trans fats, let's eat healthy food, let's do away with the processed food, let's get out and move, the Republicans in office ridiculed her. And they said, nobody's going to tell us what to do. But what happened is now that the Trump administration is saying the same thing, it's almost got inverted. It's the people who are supporting Mrs. Obama, who are supporting President Biden, who are supporting President Obama, are now objecting to the same things which are being said by President Trump's people. And it becomes one of those curiosities where, you look at it and say, how have we gotten so polarized that what matters more is who's saying it than what is being said? There is many things that are in agreement. The Make America Healthy Again report doesn't talk about eliminating vaccines. Now, there are some things that are in there that make it very difficult to believe that things are going to be any better. And I want to focus on that and then end. One of the things that there's general agreement by is that the corporations, the meatpacking plants, the pharmaceuticals, the lobbyists have too much control over the scientific studies. And again, this is what's being said now. But when Discovery Magazine wrote about this 20 years ago, the Republicans complained, said, why do you want to stop corporations from having free speech? And now what we're saying is we have to do something about this. And it's a very serious problem. In fact, study after study, when I was working with Nydia Hahn at Channel 6, one of the stories that I pitched, and we weren't able to get on the air for other reasons, was let's look at the correlation between who pays for the study and the study's outcome. Because we now know, without a doubt, that whoever pays for the study is more likely to get the results than the people who don't pay the study. But here's what the Trump administration is doing that makes it really hard to see how the Make America Healthy Again plan is going to work. One, the Trump administration is deregulating everything. So there'll be more environmental poisons put into the air and into the water. Coal is going to be burned. We're moving away from safe renewable fuels. More poisons. We're going to mine more uranium. There'll be more irradiation. There'll be more poison in the water than there has been in many years. Two, they're not going to do anything about corporate donations, lobbyists, or control of corporations funding medical studies. In fact, just the opposite. What Discovery Magazine pointed out was over the last 20 years, the federal government has continued to defund all of the medical studies, so the corporations have increased them. And now we're going to continue to do that. So if you want to have true, independent, what they call gold standard studies, you can't have them paid for by the pharmaceutical industry. That's a violation of the very principle of a gold study. But if the Trump administration is successful at defunding public health and is successful in its attack on independent universities who do studies, who's going to be left to pay for these gold standard studies other than corporations? And the final point is, Bobby Kennedy Jr. in the report writes, we can't rely upon regulations. We have to rely upon market forces to solve our problems. Well, in fact, that's how we created the problems, by not having regulations to stop poisons from being put in our water, to stop the forever chemicals from being in our bodies, the plastics, to stop the PCBs and everything else from entering into the soil and the water, from having factory farming runoffs poison the downstream. So it is inconceivable that you can have both things exist at the same time. The deregulation of business, the attack on universities, the unfunding of public health studies, and independent studies that are going to make us healthier. So I am curious, and I am looking forward to reading the next installation, which is supposed to be here in 30 days, that's going to say, how do we do all of these things?
Well, thanks a lot, Lance, for sharing something that's actually pretty darn depressing if you think about it.
You know, one day I want to come on the air with good news.
Well,
I really, one day I want to come on the news and say, we shot a astronaut to Mars and he came back safe and everything is great. And the people in Mars are looking forward to helping us.
Well, the thing is, you make a good point about the polarization, but that polarization is directly based on one very important factor. You have, when Michelle Obama said, let's move, let's eat healthier, let's grow vegetables, let's not turn the Rose Garden into a glorified, funeral home or something. You had people, it was their attitude toward what she said was based on a mistrust of her. And part of the reason why you're getting that now with, the Make America Healthy report is that there is a basic mistrust of this administration. And thus, anything that comes out of it is automatically suspect.
Yeah. And, I have the feeling that if Trump came out tomorrow and said, we're going to have universal health care for 100% of Americans, his supporters would say, well, that's right. We should absolutely do that. It doesn't matter what is said, just as long as the right person says it. And that's sort of the hallmark of this whole era we're in.
Right. I'd like to believe that I can rise above that. Maybe I can't, but I'd like to think that I can find common ground with people and say, I'm interested in the content of your speech, and I'm interested in on the things that I agree with you on, making sure it happens, and not saying I'm rooting against you because I don't like you. Yes, I don't believe that President Trump is honest. I don't believe that he is decent. I don't believe that he lives up to his word. But if we really are going to get our kids to eat healthier and get the poisons out of the water, I'm in favor, and I want to find a way to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. I have concerns about some of the other parts of their agenda, which is vaccine hesitancy, things like taking fluoride out of water, just weird stuff that everybody knows isn't a real thing,
I am open to being wrong. Again, I recognize with many years what comes is what was common knowledge turned out to be so incorrect. And, again, on a personal basis, my father struggled with ill health. And he had health insurance at that point. He had a good job, and got good care. And almost everything they told him to do was wrong, with the exception of stop smoking. That was the only good advice he got. And of course, that was the one thing he couldn't do. Told him to give up butter and eat margarine, fine with that. Tell him to eat constantly, not 3 meals a day. He was fine with that. Tell him to have a drink every night. He was fine with that. Tell him to give up sugar soda, but drink all the diet soda he wanted. He could do that. Don't exercise too hard. He could do that. And almost all those things that he was told were wrong.
Yeah.
And, science does move forward. We are making mistakes today that we will not know about for 20 years. So if someone wants to tell me there's a chance that fluoride's bad, I'm willing to listen. I don't necessarily agree. I don't understand what they're saying, but I do know that the only way things can go forward is if someone stands up and says, I have a better way. Please hear me out.
Yeah. Well, Lance, thank you so much for that. And we're going to be keeping an eye, all of our eyes on this administration to see what craziness they're up to next. But thank you so much. Vanessa, you have a few updates for us.
Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait till next week for the Devon Washington interview because it is 25 minutes long. But definitely tune in next week for that interview. And Devon is from the People's Tech Project, and they have a campaign to get the city to be more transparent when it comes to their technology and usage of AI, especially during this budget process, which I know you all have been covering. There's a lot of line items throughout all the various departments where a lot of money in the millions and millions of dollars being spent on technology, and the people want to know, what is this for? So we'll have more on that next week. In the meantime, I do have an update on public media. As you know, we've been tracking the administration's efforts to defund the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. There's been a number of different attacks, and yesterday, the White House issued its official rescission request to Congress, and now Congress has 45 days to respond to that request. Included in that request are also cuts to U.S. aid. It's a smaller request, somewhere around $9 billion. So another rescission request could come down the pipeline in the next month or so as the administration moves to make those DOGE cuts enshrined in law. And so what you'll see now is a flurry of activism, right, from both PBS, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, NPR, all of its affiliates, and a bunch of independent content creators. So people that make children's programming, people that produce independent documentaries, which I love watching on public media. And you're going to see a lot of advocacy happening with Congress, especially the U.S. Senate, to get them to reject this rescission request. Now, what's interesting is that you might have seen in the last day or so, Elon Musk has been turning against the president, not so much on this rescission request, because again, it's hard to keep track of all these funding bills, but on the big, beautiful bill, which, I deemed the big, ugly bill, which I reported on last week. And he has been using his platform on X and doing some press, urging people to contact their Republican senators to reject this bill. So there's a lot going on. Of course, our PBS and NPR affiliate here locally is WHYY. And there's many affiliates within the Delaware Valley, right, both in the Lehigh Valley in Delaware and in New Jersey. So if that is something that you support, you should definitely talk to your legislator to get more information about what their position is. And you'll see a lot of these public media organizations organizing events and campaigns. I know there's one called Protect Our Public Media. So for people that want more information, they can definitely look into that. Now, the downside is if Congress does accept these, rescission cuts, it will be very, very difficult to undo them. The second phase of this is the reconciliation process through Congress. And I feel like at some point on our show, we should maybe do some education around the federal budgeting process because there's a lot of bills and things happening. And as I was explaining this to a friend, they were like, I'm very confused. And I said, I think that's kind of the point, is to confuse people.
Absolutely is the point.
Absolutely.
Right. Like, I think they want people not to understand the process of how things get funded. And then, of course, as you know, in the past, there's been continuing resolutions in lieu of an actual budget bill, right? And so continuing resolutions are these temporary funding bills that tend to last a few weeks or a few months. A lot of times it's meant to prevent a government shutdown. Now, there's been a lot of criticism of Chuck Schumer, which is a Democratic leader in Congress, for not shutting down the government the last time there was a funding bill. And so we'll see what happens this time, right? There's a lot of cuts that are coming down the pipeline. Of course, last week we talked about the biggest one being Medicaid, right? And SNAP, which is the Nutritional Assistance Program, also known as food stamps. And we saw a number of disability rights advocates get arrested on Capitol Hill this week. And so I think we're going to see more protests and things of that nature. Next weekend, June 14th, there are going to be protests all across the country. You might have heard of them before under Hands Off, or this one's called No Kings. And I've reported on that both for WPPM and the Pacifica Radio Network. And so their flagship rally, or sort of like the epicenter, is going to be in Philadelphia, actually, at the Art Museum. And they're expecting 80,000 people to come out and protest on. And that's the 14th is Flag Day. I don't know if people recognize Flag Day.
Irony to that.
It is Flag Day. It's also the same day as President Trump's planned military parade for his birthday. That's also costing, I think it's around $60 million, I heard. And so that, yeah, and so that is why organizers from Indivisible chose that day to organize these demonstrations. And if you look on their website, they're like all over the country. So I think, summer's just getting started. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this type of stuff go on from now until the end of the the budget planning process, especially now as Congress is returning back to session. So those are all my federal updates. Of course, there's always a lot more going on.
I do think there's
And
one.
actually, I this morning when I was on Twitter, because I'm a masochist and I go on Twitter first thing in the morning, there was a weather forecaster from Florida who did a video that he was asked to do by his station to pretty much tell his South Florida viewers that he might not be able to predict hurricanes during hurricane season as accurately as he has been able to do in the past because of cuts to NOAA. And that's now for those of you who follow weather, the closest NOAA affiliate we have here in Philadelphia is in Mount Holly. And that is one of the offices, like offices around the country, that have had, endured DOGE cuts. So if you live near the Jersey Shore, or if you have friends in Florida, Louisiana, or any other places that are hit by the hurricane season that we learned in Congress doesn't actually exist from the current head of NOAA, the current White House head of NOAA, you might want to also talk to your congressman about getting that money up to speed, because people, and there's no other way to put this, people are going to die if this isn't corrected.
I think one of the underreported parts of the federal budget is the argument whether it will raise the nation's debt or not, the Trump plan. But included in the budget negotiations is increasing the debt limit for the country. So I don't understand why the mainstream media, who has a chance to ask Trump directly in the Oval Office, well, if this isn't going to raise the national debt, why do you have to raise the national debt limit?
Yeah.
It's just, again, in the category of this is just unbelievable. You say it's going to lower, your bill's going to lower the debt, but you're asking Congress to raise the national debt level. Why do you need to do that if you actually believe you're going to lower the debt? And the answer is, of course, it will not lower the debt, and it will increase the debt. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is a separate conversation, but we're almost always better off starting with the truth in making decisions than we are with anything else.
Well, that's what's interesting, because that is Elon Musk's argument about this. This is like, hey, I thought we weren't going to do that. I thought all the DOGE cuts, right, were to pay down the debt. And this bill, as he claims, does the opposite of that. We'll end because we only have a couple of minutes left, but I found this to be amusing. And it was a tweet by Congress member Marjorie Taylor Greene, who admitted that she did not read the entire Big Beautiful Bill, and saw that on 2 pages of it, it actually, remember I said it was like 1,000 pages, that on 2 pages of it, the bill actually had in a provision to take away states' rights to regulate artificial intelligence for 10 years. And she was very upset about this because a lot of these MAGA Republicans are for states' rights. And so, again, as I said before, the devil is in the details, but it just goes to show some of the most fervent supporters of this bill and of the Trump administration are not even reading the bill text. So there's that. But anyway, we'll try to break it down as much for you as we can, as the details, that was a Freudian slip, as the details continue to come in. I just want to give an update on the WPPM fundraiser. I know we just have like a minute left, but we're now at $12,085, just $415 short of our goal of $12,500. If you'd like to make a donation, go to WPPM.phillycam.org. There's a big donate button, and you can pledge for the hall monitor, because there's a place in the donation form to pledge for your favorite show, which we know is our show. So I just want to thank you if you've already supported and for continuing to listen to our show.
All right. Thank you so much. See you next week.
And again, if you like what you hear, please donate. We can't be on the air without the community support. It's really that simple.
Exactly.
No corporate dollars. We don't take any ads. We need it from the people.
All right, sounds good. You're listening to WPPM.
All right.